Okay, so this is the fabric pattern that I've printed out, and in the instructions it does ask for a 1/4 inch seam allowance. So what I did with my pattern is I just kind of cut it around like this, a little bit bigger, and then I went and made myself a cardboard one. And I always do the biggest size, figuring I can always estimate smaller, but it's harder for me to estimate bigger. So for the outer fabric, which is what is used for this, right, and scoops around here, you want to use this size. I'm just using an old pen to do this. And then I estimate just about 1 inch longer than that. You can also make 2 patterns. One is a little bit bigger and one is smaller if you'd like, if that's easier for you. I like to just do the one. It's easier for me to do. And then you want to make sure that your fabric, see how they're kissing good side to good side? That will save you time on the sewing end of things. So you want to go ahead and just outline it here. So I'm just going to do, just for video purposes, I'm just going to do 2 of the outer fabric and 2 of the liner fabric. Okay. And then when you cut it out, so I like to do it like this because it's so much easier. You're just doing 2 at once. And these will match up identically because they're mirror images of one another. So when you do cut these out, I don't have to do the whole thing for the video, but just make sure that you cut the bottom here. Okay, so this inner fabric, I'm going to switch to one that I already did. This is the inner fabric here. And see how good side to good side, right? So I'm going to get my interfacing, which is over here. So the interfacing, this one is a lightweight. You can use medium weight. I wouldn't use heavyweight. That's too thick. You wouldn't be able to breathe through it very well. So you want one of these on the top and you want one of these on the bottom. I ran out of interfacing, so I don't have one to show you. However, once you sew it together, you're going to sew on this arch right here. It's going to look like this. So I've got my interfacing. I've got one layer of my inner fabric, the other layer of my inner fabric, good size, sides kissing one another, just like we cut it out, right? So you don't have to reposition that. And then on the other side here is the other part of your interfacing. So then, here are ones that I did before the video, but this is the outer fabric. See how it's a little bit longer? That's good. We're going to need that for the loops of our ribbon on the side. So come on over here to the sewing machine. So this is good side to good side kissing, right? Come on over here, and this is 1/4 of an inch stitch. Lock your stitch. So right along the arch here. And that's that. You're going to do that, like I said, with the interfacing, inner fabric, and then the interfacing again. And then you will sew them together, as in my next video that should be clipped onto this. Thank you. Okay, so here we have the inner fabric. This is the inner fabric, this is the interfacing, which is the middle layer, and this is the outer fabric. The only difference with this is it's a little bit longer to leave room for our loops. So for the outer fabric, I'm going to turn it right side out. So here you can picture that being our mask, right? And I'm putting it in between here. I'm lining up my seams. And I'm making sure that all 3 layers are in line. Like this. I try not to do any pins because that's added holes and I don't want holes in my fabric. Putting it down, I'm making sure that my needle is going right to the edge of my interfacing, my inner layer. I'm locking my stitch by back stitching. I'm leaving about a 1/4 inch seam allowance, and then I double check that my corner is in line, or my the little top of it. It's really important that all 3 fabrics are lined up and that the inner fabric is locked in with our stitch. We don't want any gaps. And then again, I go to the end of my interfacing, back stitch to lock it off. I'm being a little hasty with my thread cutting because it's in the inside. Again, I'm lining up this seam with this seam, outer with the inner. I pinch it with my fingers, make sure all my fabric is lined up, all 3 layers, not putting in any pins, putting my needle down so that I'm going right to the edge of my interfacing. Maybe stop at the inner seam just to be sure that I'm set for the next little zip. The back stitch. You can be hasty with your cut. Now for this next part, I'm flipping it right side out, so I'm going right in between the fabric. It's a little stiff, and that's a good thing. I try not to crumple the interfacing if I can help it. We want it to be as stiff and rigid as it can be, so it holds the form of the mask. And then this is the fabric that doesn't have the interfacing in it. This one does. So this is my inner fabric. Unfortunately, I ran out of fabric. So if you have 2 different fabrics for this, it's easier because then it's very obvious which is the inner and which is the outer. And then again, I don't use any pins. I just crease it with my nail. Line up my little sides here. Make sure it's all nice and stiff where my seam is, so that when I'm sewing, I don't make mistakes. Okay, the next part I'm on the front now. So here's where the nose goes, right? This is the very tip of the arch of the nose. And I'm just using the edge of my presser foot as a guide. Back stitching. Right here I'm making the slot where the little piece of metal will go for the nose. And you can use lots of different things for this nose piece. Everybody's just using what they've got. Some people are using clip hair pieces, pieces of aluminum. My husband welds, so these are the little aluminum welding sticks. What's it called, sweetie?
Filler rod.
Filler rod. Okay, now pan down here for a sec. So if I just bend this in half and bend it a couple times, it'll break. So I'm trying to make a nice arch for the nose, right? So it looks kind of like that. And then I just carefully bend it, and I'm bending it to the arch of somebody's nose. And obviously everybody's nose is going to be a different angle. I just get it about the width. Now for this part, do you see where the interfacing is here? So I could go on this side and then it would be fabric on both sides, but I'm going on this side because there's interfacing on both sides and it's stronger. So I feed it through like this. I should say the edges of these are filed down. They're very sharp if you just cut them with wire cutter. So file the edges down, or whatever you're using. And I feed it through so that the arch that I've made in my wire is in the arch of the nose here. Now that I've got that in, my outer fabric is 1 inch or so longer than the rest. I'm just gonna sew this. I'm not gonna lock my stitch on this side because it doesn't matter. I'm gonna lock it in another way. I went a little past my fabric just to make sure this interfacing, where is it? Interfacing and the inner fabric is in line here and it's just stitched in place. Again, I'm being a little hasty with my cutting of the threads. You can go back and make it pretty afterwards. This isn't a total necessary step, but I do this so that when I thread through my ribbon at the end, it doesn't pull it inside out and show these little threads coming out, plus it'll just decrease the amount of uses you can get out of these. So I just made a tiny bit of a hem there on the side, and I'm folding it over and I'm making sure that it goes over both fabrics, right? I wouldn't want to do this. It wouldn't be very strong and we'd let stuff in here. So I want it to overlap a little bit. And I'm doing this, I'm locking my stitch again, but I'm doing this right on the edge of where I have put the little mini hem in. Okay, and we do this on both sides. So this is making a hole so that we can string our ribbon through. I've chosen to use ribbon instead of elastic because the way we are supposed to be sanitizing these is putting it in the sanitary load in your washing machine or boiling it in hot water. And elastic does not like hot things. It decreases the life dramatically, and we would like all of our hard work not to be put to waste. We don't want these going into the trash. We want people to use these, wash these, reuse these, right? So I'm doing the same thing again, making sure that this is holding my interface in place. Got a little stuck. Okay, and now you are ready to put the ribbon in. Okay, so what I'm using for the ribbon is this cross grain ribbon, and I showed you this, I'll show you this again, but it has a little texture to it and it's very strong. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna double it over, and I'm going to measure out 21 inches end to end, right? And when I cut it, please be sure you have some kind of a lighter or some kind of a candle. You need to burn the edges of it, otherwise it's going to unravel like crazy, okay? Folded it over so it's nice and strong on my safety pin, and I'm just going to thread it through here. And see how I'm doing it with the ends facing the nose piece up on the top? And then I go loop around, so there's a loop like this. And this ribbon, it's ribbed ribbon. I don't know if you can get a close-up of that. It's really strong. So it can hold out throughout the wash. I do a little loose knot on the end just so that it's not as likely to go back through here. It could if somebody really yanked on it, but hopefully they don't do that. And if they do, hopefully they know how to get it back. So this is the idea. You put your head through here. Are you showing my face? Mm-hmm. Okay, so you put your head through here, right? You put this up to your mouth, up to your nose. I guess I'll just use this one and wash it. You pull this, and then you would tie it here. And this is a men's size. You can adjust the nose, you can adjust, see how it's a little bit, it's still tight, but it's a little bit bigger because this is supposed to be for a man's face. This is a large. So that's how you do it.